Hey friends, thanks for joining me. As you can see, we are in the midst of a storm. And the storm has arrived just in time. Been wanting to do a video, this particular video, for quite some time. And I hope it'll give you friends a little bit more of an insight as to why I say some of the things I say. And in particular, learn how to resonate above. Learn how to see things from a different perspective. And I have to admit, I don't know where this is going to go. This is very difficult for me because I'm speaking from the heart. But I'm also speaking from, if you'll allow me, the wisdom of the ages. And it's taken me some time to figure this out, although this journey has been a journey that's been in the making for my life. Not too long ago, I did a video and posted it on this channel talking about my near-death experience. I talked about being in the ocean, wave capsizing on a little rubber raft, and the last thing I remember is seeing myself trying to claw to the surface of the water, looking at the sun. And the next thing I remembered at that point when I told the story is I was face down on the beach, way beyond where the waves would break. No one was around me. What I recalled to memory after that is for just a fleeting moment in time, I could see myself face down. And it was just such a fleeting moment. It came and it went, the snap of a finger. That actually has to connect with the rest of this story and why I feel I am who I am. And why in a lot of respects I can speak with the wisdom of the ages. And I hope that you friends will appreciate this. And I hope that a lot of you friends will connect with this and resonate with this. The story that I'm about to tell you is one that I've told to some of my closest associates, people that I confide in a lot. Obviously my family, Jane Doe, I Am Monica 57, more recently Enigmas, and Mark and Cora, obviously, and there's just a couple of others. All my life I have had a kindred spirit to geese, and in particular the Canadian goose, because I grew up on the East Coast, New Hampshire, Maine, and I always had, I don't know, some sort of connection feeling, admired the Canadian goose. When I was younger, I really wanted to be a biologist. Because at that time in my life, that time in history, the duck and geese population throughout the country was at a decline. And I wanted to do something about that. So growing up, 7th and 8th grade in particular, one of my class projects were hatching duck and geese eggs right there in class for everybody to see. And it really was a sight to see that life come out of that egg, and know that I had something directly to do with that, because I built out of a 10-gallon fish tank the incubator. But one of the reasons that I admire the geese, the goose type personality, is that I resonate with that quite a bit. Just some of the things that I admire about the goose is its tenacity to take on, protect, battle something much, much, much bigger than itself. Even if it's running away, it'll chase it and defend its homeland, I guess, if you will. Another thing that I admire about the goose is that when it's flying formation, when the goose that's flying the point of the V, that goose is willing to, if you will, cut the path, cut the air current, cut the spirit of the sky to make it easier for others to follow. And as that goose at the point begins to tire out, it'll drop to the back and the whole V will change shape and it will let another goose take the lead. But what's interesting about that is that it doesn't matter to the flock if it's a female goose or a male goose, because in time each member of that flock will end up taking the lead and giving those that have been at point an opportunity to rest. So I admire that about the goose. It doesn't always have to be in the front of everything. Another thing that I admire about the goose is that it mates for life. Unless that female goose loses its life, it will remain loyal to that relationship. And for Kim and I, we've been married for 40 plus years, and I am so looking forward to our 50th year together as husband and wife. And I admire that loyalty in anybody, I admire that loyalty because that's who I am. Another thing that I really admire about the goose is that when the flock needs a rest or a chance to eat, there'll always be one or two geese that'll stand sentry, and it will warn the rest of the flock when there's impending danger, a predator, if you will. Whether that sound of alarm comes from the male goose or the female goose, it shouldn't really matter to the rest of the flock that are busy either sleeping or eating. The rest of the flock will heed the warning, even if it comes from the female goose. That's why I can relate so much with the goose. The story does get even more interesting. And I'm sure that some of you will be able to point out to some other admirable qualities about the goose. In fact, here's one I just now thought about. When it comes to the geese, it's a very difficult thing to determine which one is the male and which one is the female, because they both resemble each other. And in particular, I'm referring to the Canadian goose. But another thing about the Canadian goose that I admire in particular is that all factions of life are encompassed within the feathers, the coloring of the goose, the Canadian goose in particular. Think about what that Canadian goose looks like. Most of its body is kind of grayish in color, brownish to gray. And when we go through life, we all recognize that there's a lot of gray area in life. But then there's some things in life that are not gray. They're absolutely a black and white issue. And usually, the black and white issue isn't as big a deal as one may or may not make out of, because it's just clear cut. It's absolute. When either the male or the female goose gives its warning, that's not a gray issue. There's a predator here. Pay attention. And what's interesting about that scenario is that even if the alarm comes from the female goose, every other goose will pick up its head and pay attention to the warning cry, because that predator doesn't care one way or another if he picks off an older goose or a younger goose. Doesn't care if it's a male or a female. Either case, the predator does not care. Now, this is where the story gets interesting, friends. Growing up, as I said, I was always enamored. I always had a kindred spirit to the goose. Like most men, that time in history, you always learned from the knowledge of your parents. And I learned a lot from my dad. My dad was an outdoorsman. Like myself, very loyal to the family unit. He cared more about his children than he did himself, because he wanted his boys to grow up to be reflections of him. A strong man, a family man, one who's willing to defend the unit like a goose. My dad also taught us how to hunt. And just to backtrack for just a moment, even though my dad taught us how to hunt game, how to be patient in a duck blind, how to conceal ourselves, I never did kill a goose. And I've never gone to the grocery store and buy a goose to cook. So I don't know what a goose tastes like. But I do know enough that you don't kill the goose that lays the golden egg. But anyhow, I can recall sitting in the duck blind with my brother and my dad, and I would go, shh, shh, quiet, I can hear geese. And my dad and brother would try to turn that ear and see if they could hear what I hear. They couldn't. My dad would just say, oh, you're just hearing things. No, no, listen, listen. I hear geese. The geese are coming. Get ready. Well, usually within about 10 minutes, believe it or not, that length of time would go by. And all of a sudden, here comes a flock of geese, Canadian geese. And fortunately, my dad and my brother never took a goose. And I always grew up admiring the goose. When I moved to Wisconsin, I was like in goose heaven. Oh my goodness, geese everywhere. Geese everywhere. We'd go to the zoo, and one of my favorite things to do would go to the duck pond and the geese, and you know, you'd always put your quarter or nickel in that little food machine and put your hand out, and I could get the geese to eat right out of my hand. And I'm like, boy, what a kindred spirit I felt. Then we moved to the Southwest, and this is once again where it gets interesting. Sitting in my recliner one day, and I'm looking down my driveway, and as you friends can see as you look out at the storm and the snow, my driveway is quite a ways away. So I happen to be looking down my driveway, and lo and behold, there's a Canadian goose walking down the middle of my driveway. Now keep in mind, I'm on the opposite side of the mountain chain, opposite of the Rio Grande River. So any geese that fly into New Mexico will always be on that side of the mountain. And there's also a wildlife sanctuary south of where I live that the Rio Grande River flows into, and they've opened up. And it opens up into this sanctuary. So it's really an odd thing for a Canadian goose to be walking down the middle of my driveway. And when I saw that, my mind and my heart immediately went into protection mode. Just simply because I theorized that perhaps that goose was injured some way or another, and it had to remove itself from the flock. Now, out where I live, there is a large pack of coyotes. In fact, there's several of them. And a lone goose like that would be an easy meal, easy pickings for any coyote around. So I quickly put on my shoes and I walked up to the road, and lo and behold, for whatever reason, that goose showed no fear. It showed no fear at all. I think that goose knew I was there to let it rest for a little bit. And of course, from my perspective, 5, 10 minutes, 15 minutes turned into an eternity. So after that time had elapsed, and I stood guard over that goose's life, that goose finally took to flight. So for me, that was a very spiritual moment. The story doesn't end there, friends. About a year or so after that, maybe 2, there again, maybe an eternity, who knows. Kim happened to be on the computer taking a online test that had to do with finding out what your Egyptian spirit animal was. And of course, like most of us, we all look at that stuff, well, it's a fun little test. I'll humor whoever put that program together. And sat down and I answered the questions, and when I answered the question, it went to another, page in the, Egyptian, motif, whether it be, the carvings on the wall or the pyramid. And I don't rightly recall how many questions I answered. But when I answered all the questions and I clicked on that final button to see what my Egyptian spirit animal was, well, I don't think I have to tell you. I think you friends have already reasoned that out. I might add that when I did that and the Egyptian goose come up, I got goosebumps through my body. I couldn't deny what was in front of my face, what I was seeing on my computer screen. I could not deny that. But it doesn't end there. It just doesn't end there. When probably about a week after that, maybe 2 at the very, very most, I'm going to work one morning. And once again, I'm not on the side of the mountain where geese would be. I'm going to work one morning, and I'm driving, and I'm thinking, what the heck is that in the middle of the road ahead of me? So I start slowing down, and as things came more into focus, it's like, oh my goodness, it's a goose walking down the middle of the road. I couldn't believe it. I do have pictures of it on my camera. Unfortunately, I failed to bring my camera here to show you the picture, but those pictures still exist on my cell phone. I could not any further deny what I've been experiencing. And everybody that I've relayed this story to can appreciate even deeper wisdom of the ages. And I recognize a lot of times that I say things that a lot of people may not get, may not resonate with. That's perfectly fine. That's perfectly fine. But I want your friends to realize that my personality, my connection to life, has to do a lot with ancient wisdom. I can't deny that. I can't deny that for that fleeting moment, I saw myself face down. Can't really explain it, nor do I want to, because I will let the universe tell me in her due time. But the point being, friends, is this. When the goose, whether it's a male or a female goose, sounds an alarm, will you pay attention? Will you look for the clear and present danger that's in front of you? Because if you don't, the end result is that you'll become another prey. You'll become another meal for the predator. So I hope this video gives you friends a little bit more of an insight. Because whether you're escaping the cult mentality of Watchtower, or unable to recognize some of the cult mentality that's in this community, there's always a clear and present danger. And there will always be somebody standing as a sentry looking out while you can rest and eat. And at some point in this journey, the old gander has to rest. Just has to rest. I don't know what further to say other than when that warning is sounded, will you listen? Bye.